Hello and welcome to the Secure Software Summit. I'd like to first, my name is Rinehard. I'll be your speaker for this session on the new playbook for operating safe, secure, and reliable systems with security chaos engineering. I'd like to first off thank the organizers of the conference, Teton, Shift Left, Alan Jenkins, and Textron Media. This is really an exciting event for a remote event. What a great lineup of speakers. You got Shannon Leeds, Josh Corman, Vandana Verma, Jonathan Schneider, and a whole list of other amazing speakers. So I'm really excited to be a part of this. Without further ado, I will kick off my session. If you look at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see @AaronReinhardt. That's my Twitter. My DMs are open. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to follow up, or happy to do that. So let's dive in. So in terms of things we're going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about the nature of complexity in modern software. I'm going to talk about what is this thing called chaos engineering. I'm going to talk about chaos engineering and its applications to cybersecurity as well. I'm going to talk about some use cases you can apply it to. I'm going to walk through a very simple experiment framework. These are for authoring or writing security chaos experiments. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to use an example of that via an open source tool I wrote 4.5 years ago called Chaoslinger. So a little bit about me. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Verica. I co-founded Verica with the creator of chaos engineering at Netflix, Casey Rosenthal. Let's say I'm the former chief security architect at United Health Group. That's where I started pioneering sort of the application of Netflix's chaos engineering to cybersecurity. I have a background in actually safety and reliability engineering at NASA, as well as Department of Defense. I'm a frequent speaker and author on chaos engineering and security. I'm the O'Reilly author on security chaos engineering and the main body of knowledge, this book right here. I recommend picking it up. It's the main body of knowledge for chaos engineering. I wrote the chapter on security chaos engineering, as well as I'm the co-author on the O'Reilly Security Chaos Engineering Report with Kelly Shortridge. Kelly and I are currently writing another, the actual full version of this book, like this one right now, which will come out later this year. For the first 500 participants to this session, there will be a link at the very end of this slide deck, bit.ly, where you can go register to get a free copy, printed copy shipped to you of the Security Chaos Engineering Report. So stay tuned for that. What's interesting is in these pictures you see on the right-hand side, on the very bottom is actually the week after we released the first open source tool that applied Netflix's chaos engineering to security. And that's the group, that's the chaos engineering folks and the security folks. A very interesting day for me, being able to explain chaos engineering and how it's applied to security to the Netflix team. So it was a great day. So let's get started with the material. The problem is that outages, breaches, and incidents seem to be becoming more and more often and larger in scope and scale, and we don't seem to be getting better at the problem. So why is this? I mean, what are we doing wrong? Well, the problem is our systems have evolved beyond a human ability to mentally model their behavior. The size, scale, speed, and complexity of modern software is challenging. If you look at this picture on the left here, you'll see a bunch of dots and lines connecting them. Well, each dot is actually a microservice. And remember, microservices are not independent, they're interdependent. So they're dependent upon each other. Our systems are quickly evolving into becoming larger and harder to model their behavior post-deployment. So where does this complexity seem to be coming from? Well, you'll see here things like DevOps, continuous delivery, service meshes, circuit breakers, microservices, CI/CD, pipelines, cloud computing. All these. You said, Aaron. Well, yeah, but these capabilities are helping us deliver value to market faster via product to customer. Well, that's true, but it's also increasing the amount of complexity that we're having to deal with post-deployment. So, newsflash, you haven't figured out already, software has officially taken over. If you look on the right here, that's the new OSI stack. It's software. And that's part of the problem is the adoption and growth of software within our systems and the nature of the flexibility of the and ease of changing software has increased the amount of changes we're able to make to the system, which is also directly related to the amount of complexity we see as a result. So adding on to that, software only ever increases in complexity. It will never decrease in complexity. It's because if you let's say you have a complex set of software and say, oh, I want to make my system, my software less complex. Well, what do you have to do that if you want to make it simple? You have to change it. Well, the process of actually making the change actually increases complexity. Really, so the theory is really you're kind of just moving complexity around. You're not actually simplifying anything. So then that's what we're really trying to do when it comes to chaos engineering. Chaos engineering is not about chaos. It's not about breaking things in production. That all sounds cool, right? But that's not what it's about. It's actually a much more practical instrumentation technique. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to navigate the already complex systems and chaos we're dealing with through asking the computer a series of questions. So, for example, consider a legacy system at your company where you work, or company you have worked in the past. I mean, let's something like a mainframe. I mean, how did our legacy systems typically are, their legacy typically means business critical. That's what that means, or else we would have gotten rid of the legacy system. We would have refactored or redesigned it. But they're somewhat known as being somewhat stable. They're fairly known as being somewhat documented. Engineers feel confident and competent in how the system operates and how to, and where its weak points are and how to improve it. But the question is, was the system always that way, right? And the answer is no, it wasn't, right? Like when we originally designed the system, we learned that with the difference between what the system how it actually operated versus how we thought it operated through a series of unforeseen surprises. If it wasn't a surprise, we would have fixed it. Okay, so we learned that the system worked differently than we thought through a series of outages, incidents, and that type of behavior. And that's we learned what we didn't know, and then we went back, recalibrated, and remediated the system, and then we continued that process. The problem with that way of working is that it often leads to pain, right? Pain in terms of the customer having pain in terms of an operating experience, or engineers, people operating the system having to encounter those types of events during, high caliber business outcome type of scenarios. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can think of chaos engineering as a proactive way of introducing conditions into the system to try to ensure the system can still do what it's supposed to do when it incurs those events. So, for example, things like retry logic, or failovers, or security detective or preventative type of measures. And we design them for a point in time based upon some kind of trigger, some kind of event, some kind of traffic flood, or some kind of volume in customer requests, or some kind of misconfiguration, or some kind of, we design these mechanisms for those types of events. What happens is engineers today, because of software, and they kind of always have even before software, they're constantly in there changing the system. They're in there changing the system a lot. So when we originally designed the conditions based upon our knowledge of the system, the system has actually changed a lot since we originally designed that retry logic, or that failover logic, or that detective measure, right? And what happens is when those conditions, those triggers actually occur within a system, are those mechanisms we designed may not perform as well as we think they are supposed to. So chaos engineering, what we're doing is we're proactively, before there's a problem, right? We're proactively say, hey, computer, Under the conditions that you're designed to perform under, do you perform the way you're supposed to? We do that by introducing the conditions themselves in a controlled manner, considering things like blast radius and whatnot. There's a whole series of things you consider when you do these experiments. Highly recommend you picking up either one of these books. They described it very well on how to approach it. We introduce them in a controlled manner to ensure they're ready to meet the demands of that we originally designed the system to meet. So we also forget that systems engineering is a very messy exercise. It's we often forget, I believe, it's because our brains have to simplify complex things in order to create order and organize them in order to synthesize outcomes, results, and solutions. And so, for example, in the beginning of a systems lifecycle, we love to think the system looks like this, right? We have a plan. We know how much time we have. We always need more time for software, right? We have the resources, we have our code repositories, we got our Docker images, we've got, our different environments, our lower environments, our upper environments, staging, prod, QA, right? And then, of course, we have that nice 3D diagram of our AWS instance that we're going to deploy to, right? The reality of it is, actually, our system never looks like this. It never is this simple, and it never, we just love to believe it is. So what happens is quickly after the system goes live, we start learning about how the system actually operates through a series of unforeseen events, right? Well, after first week, marketing comes down and says, "Oh, we got the pricing wrong. We need to refactor the pricing module," or are there there's an outage on the payments API with a hard-coded token, right? Or of course we go back and fix that, right? We don't go from war room to war room to war room to war room, right? We actually remediate things, right? And we come back and fix it. Sure. But then there's an audit, a regulatory audit, or there's a customer audit, or it's always DNS, right? There's an outage on DNS. The point here is that our system slowly evolves into a state that we really don't understand it anymore. We're learning. The thing is what we have to do is build these tool sets and the skill sets to adopt and evolve with the system as our understanding of the system and the context around it evolves. So in the end, our systems have become more complex and messy than we originally remember them being. So what does this stuff have to do with security? I'm getting to it. So cybersecurity is a context-dependent discipline. So I've been a software engineer most of my career before I got into security. I've been kind of done every discipline, but software engineer most of my career. So as a software engineer, my job is to deliver, value via product via software to the customer, right? So I'm constantly in there trying to deliver on business requirements for the product via software, constantly change it. So I need the flexibility and convenience to change what I need to change in order to figure out how to deliver what the business has asked me to deliver for the product, right? I'm not even sure to remember what it's like to be a software engineer. I'm not even sure I can do this. Yeah, I have to figure it out, right? That's the fun part of actually software. You got to figure it out, right? Well, I'm in there trying to figure it out, right? I'm constantly, remember, there's more than just one software engineer. So lots of them. We're in there constantly changing the system, right? We need that flexibility and convenience to change it. We don't know exactly what permissions we need yet, or the exact security setup yet, because we're still designing, right? Well, so we're constantly there changing. We're moving towards business value. That's our metric. We're trying to deliver product via software and value to the customer, right? Well, security is a context-dependent discipline. So we must know what we're trying to secure in order to know what we need to secure about it. So by default, we're forced into a staple understanding of something in order to understand what needs to be built around the security. The context is somewhat staple, right? So what happens is we go forth, we'll build some sort of detective, preventative, or some sort of security mechanism based upon that context. But we'll remember that the the system is constantly changing. What happens? You start to get you don't know there's a problem, or the security no longer works until it no longer works, right? And that's kind of the problem with today, right? Is that there's this drift issue between engineers constantly changing the system and the lack of recalibration between the system and the security mechanisms that we've designed for it. And a lot of times we don't know there's a problem until there is a problem, like there's some sort of log event or some sort of alert or some sort of something can't connect to something or download a manifest. Well, it's important to recognize that security is context dependent. So chaos engineering and security chaos engineering, where does it fit in terms of the world of instrumentation? Well, so Casey and myself like to sort of break down instrumentation into sort of two domains. There's testing and experimentation. So testing would be the verification or validation of something you already know to be true or false. It's a binary thing. We know what we're looking for before we go looking for it, right? So in our world, that could be a CVE, an attack pattern, a signature, those sorts of things, right? Well, in the world of experimentation, we're trying to derive new information that we previously did not know. Things about the unknown kind of behavior, trying to drive a better understanding and provide that context back to the people designing this and delivering the system. So how do we typically discover when our security measures fail? Well, typically we discover when security fails during a security incident. Some sort of security incident is launched as a result of either some sort of footstep in the sand, meaning a log event, a stack trace, or some kind of alert, some observability types of events that tell us what's going on inside the system through its external outputs. But the problem is, by the time we usually discover the security incident, it's kind of already too late in the life cycle to really do a whole lot about it. We need to be more proactive, at least in terms of the things we can control about the system. So what happens during a security incident? Well, in short, people freak out. Okay. This is what happens, right? Is that especially software engineers, like, I knew I shouldn't have pushed that code, right? I knew there's an issue with that. Or, I knew I should have been up at 3 a.m. making changes, right? Like this is not a good learning environment, right? So this is not where we do chaos engineering. The purpose of chaos engineering is to proactively verify the system does what it's supposed to do and learn if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, learn about that additional context we're unaware of, and use that context to turn around and build a better and more reliable system. So we do chaos engineering here. Well, there is no active war room. There is no active problem. We do it to proactively verify that before we need these important critical system capabilities to function, that they can do what they need to do. We do that through a series of experiments and experimentation. So in the end, this environment's much easier to learn under. There's less cognitive load. People are not worried about the blame, name, shame game. They're not worried about being blamed for causing the incident and being named to their boss and worried about losing their jobs, right? Because honestly, that's what goes through a lot of people's heads. If you're in security, or even if you're not, and you listen to this talk, you've probably been in this situation before. It all happens to all of us. Right. But you'll remember that this environment here is not a very comfortable environment to be learning from, because you're not really focused on, learning. You're focused on get that thing back up and running. We're losing money. That's the issue. Right. So let's not be doing our chaos engineering here. We do it here. Okay. Chaos engineering. So a Netflix definition of chaos engineering is chaos engineering is a discipline of experimentation on distributed systems in order to build confidence. That's key, build confidence in the system's ability to withstand turbulent conditions. Or another way of saying it, it's idea or practice of proactively introducing turbulent conditions into the system to try to determine the conditions by which the system will fail before it actually fails. For chaos engineering, it's really about building trust and confidence. So we're not creating chaos. Systems are already chaotic. We're trying to establish order. And that order helps us build our confidence and the trust in what we're doing. Currently, there are 3 publications on chaos engineering. I talked about that earlier. There's an original Netflix report similar to this version of the book from O'Reilly that was written by Casey, Nora, and the rest, and Lauren and the other folks on the Netflix team. And then there's going to be the next book in this iteration is the follow-on book from Kelly and I. So security chaos engineering, or the application of chaos engineering and the practice of chaos engineering to cybersecurity. I love to start off a good talk on security chaos engineering, talking about my two favorite things that we don't believe in engineering. So as an engineer, we don't believe in two things. We don't believe in hope. We don't believe in luck. I mean, we believe in data, instrumentation. We believe in feedback loops. We believe like context, and does those help us understand what didn't work or what did work, so we can improve the system and get better at what we do. So things like hope. I mean, it's not an effective strategy. I mean, it worked in Star Wars, but it doesn't work for us. So what we're trying to do is kind of proactively understand our system and build confidence in that, but also understand where the security gaps are, that a divergence might be occurring before an adversary has a chance to take advantage of it, of the fact that we have a gap and we just can't see it. So here's some use cases you can apply security chaos engineering to. I'm finding almost every day that somebody's applying it in a different way, but some of the main areas where people get a lot of value from doing it are security control validation. A lot of this is like architecture type of validation, verifying that security controls work the way they're supposed to, when they're supposed to, they're placed correctly, they're effective, they trigger under the right conditions, and that's kind of where I started doing it. Incident response is also a great use case. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Security observability, understanding how effective your system observability, things like your monitoring, your alerting, are at detecting certain types of events. So that's key. And then compliance monitoring. Every chaos experiment, whether it's security or availability based, has compliance values. So make sure you're keeping that in a high output, in a high integrity way, hashing it, whatever, and labeling it with the right control framework. You get basically free auditable artifacts. So I would keep that, because basically you're proving whether the technology worked the way it's supposed to, and that's great. That's great information. So incident response. Well, the problem with the incident response is that it's a response, and that's the nature of the problem with the process. And so security incidents are somewhat subjective. No matter how many people you have, or how many fancy security controls you have, we really don't know much about what's happening or what's going to happen, right? You don't know who's trying to do it, what they're trying to do to get in, where they're coming from, how they're doing it, or why they're even doing it, right? I remember at my former employer, we were the largest healthcare companies in the world. We spent a lot of money and time and effort in human beings. I mean, more than most companies that I've come across, in trying to be good at incident response and cybersecurity. And it's just hard. You don't know if the technologies put in place are actually effective until they meet the challenge that they were designed for, which is kind of the problem. You're waiting for that event to occur to know how effective it is at those types of situations. And furthermore, the security response teams are also, it's hard to measure how effective they are in those situations until the events occur. So what chaos engineering, what we do is we're proactively introducing the signal instead of waiting for something to happen and try to figure out, did we have the right log event? Did we have the right context to figure out where that came from? Did, you might not be getting logging from some control because somebody might have updated it to a new version and forgot to set the logging configurations to the correct parameters. Stuff like that happens, right? Like the thing is like you don't want to find that out during an active problem, right? So with chaos engineering, we're not guessing when it started. We actually introduced the condition and the signal in the system. When we can see how effective our run books were, or we see how, if we have the right number of people on call, if we're effective, if our observability events from our firewalls or from our security controls were good, gave us good information, they're quickly determined what was happening, where it was happening, that sort of information. So there's a lot of value in that. So on to Chaoslinger. So Chaoslinger was the first ever application to Netflix's chaos engineering to cybersecurity. Netflix did not do chaos engineering for cybersecurity prior to this. This was the first ever application of it. And I'll talk a little bit about what Chaoslinger does. Oh yeah, so let me just back up here. So Chaoslinger, just a little bit about it. I realize I'm not going too far in depth into this, but you can go out to the GitHub repo for Chaoslinger. It's a deprecated repo. It's from United Health Group repo. When I left United Health Group, it's their open source project. But it still represents a good framework for writing experiments. There's three different functions, lambda functions, in order to write an experiment. There's generator, there's slinger, and there's tracker. So generator actually does target acquisition. It defines where you're going to actually do the chaos. Slinger actually introduces the change. And in the example I'm going to explain next, it actually opened or closes a port that wasn't open or closed to try to introduce a misconfigured type of port condition change into an EC2 security group. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then tracker tracks the output of the experiment and reports into Slack so it can be remediated and followed. And that's, you can look up more information there or pick up the Security Chaos Engineering report or fill out the form at the very end of this presentation. You'll be able to get a free copy sent to you, printed copy sent to you. All right, so the primary experiment we went with when we released Chaoslinger to the open source world, we went a good example. We had several experiments that we used at United Health Group with sort of an internal repo of experiments. We had a public one, but we needed an experiment that we could make public that a lot of people could understand. So no matter whether you're a firewall engineer, a network engineer, a software engineer, whatever function you just are, an executive, you can kind of understand what a misconfigured port is. We've been solving for that problem for a long time, and it still remains to be still a problem. Keeps remanifesting itself in different new technology evolutions. But it happens for lots of reasons. It could be that someone submitted a ticket wrong. It could be that an engineer didn't understand network flow. It could be that somebody applied the change incorrectly. For lots of reasons, it happens, right? Misconfigured unauthorized port changes happen all the time. Well, when I was at United Health Group, we were very new to AWS at the time, and we had a lot of confidence in the fact that we believed in our firewalls would detect. So our belief was that our firewalls immediately detect and block this kind of thing and be a non-issue. So okay, well, let's design an experiment that does this, right? So during business hours, we would sort of randomly select a bunch amongst a opt-in tag. So the opt-in tag was an AWS reference tag for whether something could be subjected to chaos engineering or not. For example, you might not want to opt in the edge of your network on AWS to open or closing a port. So anyway, so it would select amongst that group of tags, and it would select a security group, and it would either open or close a port that wasn't already open or closed. So immediately what we found out when we started doing this on our AWS instances, remember we were new to AWS at the time, but we started finding out our firewalls only detected that behavior about 60% of the time. So that was an eye-opening experience. So we learned it was a drift issue, a configuration drift issue between our non-commercial and our commercial software instances, and we fixed it. So remember, it was proactive. We fixed it proactively. There was no issue. There was no war room, right? The second thing we learned is our cloud-native configuration management tool caught and blocked it every time. So something we barely were paying for, didn't even know how effective it really was caught and blocking it every time. The third thing we expected is that we didn't really have a SIEM at the time. We sort of had a security big data lake, and we sort of homegrown. And I wasn't confident that it would actually trigger an alert and it would be effective at correlating the log data and alerting the SOC. But actually did, so that worked better than we thought. The problem was when they so that was the third thing we learned. But the SOC actually got the alert, they couldn't tell which AWS instance it came from. Now you're like, Aaron, you can map back the IP address and figure out where it came from. Yeah, you can, right? I mean, that could take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The SNAT is in the equation. It could take, an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. If 1 minute of downtime is, $50,000 or $1 million, that could add up really quickly, right? So what happened was, remember, there was no war room. There was no issue. We proactively realized, hey, all we got to do is add a metadata pointer to the alert, and it would be we fixed the problem. Nobody was worried about being blamed. Nobody was worried. The system was never really down. We were able to proactively verify some of these things did not really work the way we thought they did. Turn around and have adequate time to remediate and fix it before the real world was on fire. So that's the key value of this stuff is being proactive in verifying these things. So that's in essence, that's the example of Portslinger. More than happy to answer any questions anyone has via Twitter or via Q&A. But here is the link to download. That's Kelly Shortridge at the top there. That's me, and that's what the port looks like. For the first 500 people who complete that Typeform form, we'll get that includes us to be able to get your address information to ship you the book, but we'll get you a print copy of the book. And so in summary, it's about learning. It's about learning to navigate complexity and build confidence in our security. The next steps would be that I recommend is pick up a copy of the report, go through it. It'll give you sort of the necessary bits you need to get started. You'll be able to see use cases from Capital One, Cardinal Health, United Health Group, and in the bigger book, there's going to be a good 12 to 15 other case studies that you'll get a lot of value from. And I'll leave you with the last thing would be one is thank you for taking the time to view my session, but also remember, stop looking for better answers and start asking better questions. That comes from John Allspaw, who is one of the creators of DevOps, as well as resilience engineering in the world of software. Thank you very much for your time.